After this summary of yesterday's work, I am going to be introducing today's chairperson. I shall call our chairperson Dr. Chris Hayes from Australia. Dr. Chris Hayes is principal of Chaya College in Melbourne, Australia, and has been since 2009, was headmaster of the Edmund College in Canberra from 2005 to 2008, and was director of the Senior School of St. Ignatius College in Sydney as well from the year 2001. So his is a clear managing trajectory. His PhD dissertation is on paradoxes in pedagogy, a study of Australian Jesuit schools implementing Ignatian pedagogy. He has great experience as well in managing and directing schools and in team dynamics. Chris, thank you very much indeed, and we shall begin now. You have the floor.
Good morning, everyone, and a very warm welcome to those who are joining us online throughout the world. As we come to our last day of formal discussions, we have much to be thankful for, particularly the opportunity to share, reflect, and discover new ways by listening intently to each other. And today, we move to the Ignatian lens of commitment. We're all very much aware that commitment is synonymous with action. Ignatius was convinced that love was shown more in deeds than in words. It's my great pleasure to introduce Father Joseph Carver from the Oregon province in the United States. Joseph has a long-time commitment to ecological awareness and action. He's been a teacher for nearly 20 years in both high schools and colleges. He's just completed his term as the founding president of the Seattle Nativity School. And for those who may be unfamiliar with the work of nativity schools, they are to educate the poorest of the poor. He's currently the superior and pastor of the Jesuit community in Montana. He's studied at St. Joseph's University in Philadelphia, Fordham, Berkeley, and Oxford. His major focus and writings concern the intersection of spirituality and ecology. He's published various articles on the topic, most recently in the American magazine. Father Carver believes fervently that the committed person is a person of courage, a person of action, and a person with a longer view. Ladies and gentlemen, it's my great pleasure to invite Father Joseph Carver to present at this seminar.
Good morning to all of you and to all of our friends who are joining online. Thank you, Chris, for that lovely introduction, and very kind. I have a very small dream, just a tiny one that maybe in 45 minutes we can instantiate. And that is that all of the apostolic works and schools of the Society of Jesus share in a commitment to action in the healing and reconciling with creation. Just a little tiny, tiny dream. That we participate in the healing of the earth, and so we ourselves will end up being healed in our relationships with one another, in our relationships particularly with the most vulnerable, the crucified people of the world, as well as to be reconciled with creation. As you all read in the paper, I was asked to do just a quick synopsis, a quick overview of what it is that we are committing ourselves to. If the committed person is a person of action and the committed person takes courage, the committed person, I believe, also is a person of the long view. Ignatian spirituality and ecology, allows us to enter into this conversation of being part of the world. But for so long, we have talked of the human person as the steward of the world. And I would like to propose a different way of proceeding, not stewardship. That we understand ourselves first and foremost as derivative of the world. And that if, as committed Christians, we have a particular role in the environmental movement because of our belief in the mystery of the incarnation. And that we have a responsibility to reconcile the dichotomies that have so long permeated our understanding. Dichotomies of spirit and matter, of ecology and spirituality, so that we can participate as derivative persons in the life of the world. I believe that the spiritual exercises of St. Ignatius, particularly here at Manresa, where so many of us have been so profoundly affected, that it provides us a way forward with a way of commitment, a way of action. Haven't those of us who have experienced the exercises felt that same impelling spirit as we complete the contemplation to attain divine love, to impel us out into the world? That creation is the place for salvation, that we cannot know God apart from it. The principle and foundation, I believe, in the exercise is an invitation profoundly to relationship. Relationship with ourselves, with one another, with our God, and indeed with creation. And this will increase our ecological awareness. As I was saying, the incarnation in particular is a way, I believe, of intimacy. That Jesus, who shares identity with God, therefore, who is part of the earth, and therefore shares a special relationship. So care of the earth and protection of the earth creates for us an opportunity to be in deeper relationship with our God. I was so struck by walking into the cave downstairs and seeing first, the very first image as we enter the cave was an image from creation. It was a sunflower turning as it does to face the sun. The very first image that we are offered as we move into the depth of where Ignatius formulated the exercises. Ignatius also presents us in those exercises with the contemplation on the two standards, a way of looking at what we have talked about so many times here in this conference around the idea of social sin and how we participate that with the ecological destruction of the earth. The committed person, certainly we have lessons to learn, and I had particular lessons to learn from giving the exercises and praying in a new way. And I will bet that 100% of the persons in this room and online, that's quite a wager, that all of the persons here and online have found a special relationship with God through the natural world. And we will talk more about that. And through our Ignatian imagination and through the prayer of the Ignatian Examen, that we might deepen that relationship, that we might deepen our commitment, that we might deepen what is being offered by our God, which is nothing short of the healing of the world, the healing of creation, indeed the healing of ourselves. What was asked in the forum, what was sent to us as directives from General Congregation 35, was something that I would like to highlight briefly first. Because long before Ignatius received approval from Pope Paul III, he was told to introduce more sacramental understandings into the founding documents of the society. And the sacrament that he chose to introduce was one of reconciliation. And ecology was one of the themes which received countless postulatas coming forward for the General Congregation 35 from all parts of the world. And this, I believe, indicates a movement that is afoot in the works of the Society of Jesus. The apostolic works, the works in parishes, the works in our schools and our spirituality centers. And the recommendations of GC 35 that the society should accept this ecological dimension not only as an apostolic priority, but would also consider it as a permanent dimension of our mission. Those are very strong words. That we are to consider this commitment as a permanent dimension of our mission. We had hints of this in previous general congregations. GC 34 stated, unscrupulous exploitation of natural resources and the environment degrades the quality of life, and it destroys culture and sinks the poor further into misery. But if we are to be a people who are committed, a people of action, it takes courage, tremendous courage, that we seek the right relationships through reconciliation with God, with one another, and indeed with creation. The globalization and technology and environmental concerns have been a challenge and will continue to challenge our traditional boundaries. And they will also enhance our awareness that we become aware of our common responsibility for the welfare of the earth and its development in a sustainable and life-giving way. Using discernment, this precious gift that has been given to us by Ignatius, using the Ignatian Examen, and using the imagination in Ignatian prayer, our pedagogy, the Ignatian pedagogical paradigm, I believe, my friends, will come alive in a new way. If we are to commit ourselves as a singular focus of what is happening. And you look at what the documents, not only the documents of the General Congregation, but we found that this is something that has been growing out of the society ever so slowly. If you read carefully Father Kolvenbach's speech that he gave at Hekima College, if you look at the yearbook that has just come out, what is its focus? Ecology. If you look at where the interest is of our students, that they know that this is the earth that they are going to inherit. And as I said, to be a committed person is to be a person of action. The subtitle of this conference is that the world is our house. That if the earth is our home, and indeed is our only home in this great and wondrous universe, you would be appalled if I were to take my cup and throw it on the floor. You would be appalled if I were to just leave trash as I walked through this glorious place where Ignatius was writing the original exercises. But isn't that so often what we are doing to creation? The committed person, through the lens of Ignatian spirituality and ecology, offers us, I believe, a long view. It offers us a long view because it asks us to understand ourselves not as stewards of creation, but as derivative of creation. And that knowing our common story will fill our imaginations. Rusty Swigart, who was an astronaut on the Apollo missions, when he went to space for the first time, noticed something that all of us have done. And perhaps some of you might have done last night with the moon nearly full. That you can take your thumb and hold it up and you can block out the moon. And here he was in the Apollo mission, holding up his thumb and blocking out the earth. Realizing from that perspective that all he held dear, all those he loved, all those that had inspired him to action and to pursue his dream of becoming an astronaut, had been obscured by his thumb. Climate change, pollution, extinction of plants and animals, species, the emission of greenhouse gases, the question of the harmful treatment of the earth through chemical pesticides, all of these things are exactly what we are doing by obscuring the earth. Every time a species goes extinct, it would be as if we were tearing a page from every single Bible in the world, eliminating that text. That text no longer appears to us. If we were walking through an artist's studio, for indeed, if God is the great artist and creator, and we were smashing the singular sculpture, destroying it forever. The greatest discovery of the scientific enterprise is that if you take hydrogen gas and if you leave it alone for about 14 billion years, it turns into all sorts of wonderful things, like dinosaur pee and rose bushes, giraffes, and indeed human beings. Because, my friends, in order to tell the story, the human story of our covenant with God as committed persons, we need to tell the story of everything. $14 billion years ago, our universe flashed forth in an epic explosion. $12 billion years ago, stars began to take shape. And 4.6 billion years ago, our grandmother star became a supernova, and she gave up her life in an explosion of possibilities. $4 billion years ago, the first cells emerged on Earth, and the Earth quieted and cooled. 3.9 billion years ago, life emerged from the great seas and was able to gaze upon itself for the first time. 600 million years ago, eyes emerged and the Earth saw herself. 4 million years ago, creatures filled the earth and the seas with fish that fly and birds that swim. Flowers erupted and filled the earth with color. And our most precious gift of water became a common language of all creation. $100,000 years ago, hominids left the forest, stood for the first time. The earth had adorned herself in magnificent beauty, inviting all sky creatures into a new dance. Only 3,000 years ago did classical religions begin to emerge. The religions emerged, and human beings began to worship the earth, understanding it as their first teacher. 250 years ago, scientists began to attempt to calculate the age of Earth. 75 years ago, scientists first saw the Earth from space. A new creation. In light of Christian faith, Pope John Paul II wrote that we must shape our moral lives that respect for life and the dignity for the human person also extends to all of creation. And the French philosopher and paleontologist Teilhard de Chardin captured a moment of this crisis in a well-known parable, telling us that the human race is a ship moving through an uncharted sea. For millennia, human beings have lived below the hold of the ship, unaware of the larger evolutionary process moving through the boat. And now we have crossed topside, And now we have found a tiller, navigational instruments, and charts. We have indeed crossed a threshold. And as Jesuit schools, perhaps we ourselves in particular, have an invitation to do what our founder had done, to begin to look again at the stars. Diego Lainez wrote, "At night, Ignatius would go up on the roof of the house with the sky there above him, and he would sit quietly, and he would take his hat off and look for a long time at the night sky. And then he would fall to his knees, bowing profoundly to the majesty of God. And his tears were described as a stream." Long before I was able to come here to this place of the Cardinere, I imagined Ignatius as a river sitter. We all know the story of Pamplona and the cannonball. But in my imaginative prayer, I found myself time and time again sitting with Ignatius next to the river, imagining myself there. But as I shifted that contemplation and imagined myself no longer as a human person, but as the soil itself, I was given an extraordinary gift. I was given the gift of Ignatius quite literally leaving his impression upon me in that soft soil of my contemplation. And what I share with you today is the shaping of that, my own ecological vision, a vision for all of our schools and apostolic works. Because we know that humanity's footprint continues to consume at an ever greater amount and an ever greater number of resources every day. Because during the 20th century alone, the population in the world has grown from 1.6 billion to over 7 billion, that our global footprint now exceeds the world's capacity to regenerate by over 34%. If our demands on the planet continue at the same rate, by the mid-2030s, we will need the equivalent of 2 to 5 planets to maintain our lifestyles. And the U.S. has 5% of the world's population, but it consumes 30% of the world's resources. We know, too, that green products, from the time we are born until the time that we die, are permeating the market. That the increased concern about the environment has spawned not only this surprising concern, but a whole host of other environmental products as well. But we know too that there is no away. I grew up perhaps like many of you saying, "Oh, just throw it away." And I would ask you, in this one earth home that we have, where is away? We look at this photo and we can see in this dump that there is no away. That over 2,500 tons a day, between 600 people between 15 and 18 live on San Salvador's dump, a place that I have visited many times. We are all concerned with social justice and with the solidarity with the least. What Ellacuría said so beautifully as the crucified people of the world. And that the crucified people of this world are much deeper in need and in poor because of our environmental degradation. This dump 15 miles outside of San Salvador, where over 2,000 sifters, as they are called, live. And we are aware that alongside this unsustainable consumption that we choose, this consumptive pattern of wealthy nations and individuals, that we know that here on earth 3 billion people still live on less than $1 a day. 1 billion live in this way, and participants yet are paid about $150 a month as they sift through the garbage. And they offer it to a place, buyers outside who ironically call themselves Esperanza, hope, is the name of their business. In this realization, every one of our schools is confronted with a choice. Every apostolic work and parish of the society is presented with a choice. We either have to doom these 3 billion people and the billions more that will join them as ecological and climate change refugees to continued poverty, or we will have to make room for them at the table of education and development, that we will have to bring our best understanding of our pedagogical paradigms to bear so that we can teach a new way of being. And this noble dream cannot be achieved without a substantial reduction in the current use of our global resources. If every atom of iron in our blood would not have been there had it not been produced by some galactic explosion billions of years ago and eventually condensed into a form of iron in the crust of the earth from which we have emerged as derivative persons. Iron plays a vital role in our body chemistry. Iron molecules are the foundation of the more complex molecules that eventually combine with proteins to provide hemoglobin for our systems. And this extraordinary molecule is able to absorb more than 50 times the amount of oxygen that it otherwise would. And the properties of this iron-based molecule regulate the critical balance of oxygen that would otherwise become a toxic gas in our bodies. Representative of our whole communion with the material order, we are in a profound way bonded with these elements of earth and air. And this relationship does not exist simply on a micro level. I look out here in front of me and I see our sisters and brothers from India and Southeast Asia. And I am reminded that as the tectonic plates collided with one another, some of the most towering mountain ranges of our world emerged. And the Himalayas and others not only soar to incredible heights, but plunge to profound depths. And in this movement of rock and water and molten energy and swirling soil, watersheds are filled, silicates are released, and we receive from the earth the very iron that we need to breathe. We receive from the earth the very water that is the common language of all creation. We struggle here at times to communicate with one another, but if we were to offer an image for the language of all living things on earth, it would be water. And yet we know too that most people walk at least 3 hours. The majority of the people in the world walk at least 3 hours to fetch water. And that if all the world's water, if all of the potable water of this world were to be put into 1 gallon jug, the fresh water available to all of us would be only a single tablespoon. What is happening to our people around the earth, particularly the poorest of the poor, is a breakdown of the socialization of family structures, traditions, rituals, narratives, and community. Imagine if each one of you and those of you following online had to give up 3 hours out of your day. Suddenly eliminated, just like that. I spent some time working in Colombia, and I took this photo in a community called El Dorado. Each day, almost 10,000 children under the age of 5 in the developing world die as a result of illnesses that would not occur if they had access to clean and potable water. And yet today, I will pick on my own country, my own home nation, that the typical American meal contains on average ingredients from at least 4 countries outside the United States and takes on average over 10,000 gallons of virtual water to produce. We clearly have a dysfunctional relationship with Earth. This photo, taken along the Magdalena River, shows how the earth is choking, that the earth is choking on what we are producing. And I cannot help but think back to one of the greatest oil spills that has happened in the last 10 years, the BP oil spill in the Gulf. And I watched as that video horrified. And what was the words that I thought of? I thought of John's gospel, John's gospel, where they say so clearly, and they will look upon the one whom they have pierced. They will look upon the one whom they have pierced, because we have indeed, my friends, pierced the side of the earth, and the earth was hemorrhaging. And in nearly 100 years, in nearly 10 years, there are 100 worldwide oil spills. Oil spills because we continue to pierce the side of the earth. And our sins are being visited on those who are part of the coastal communities. In this case, in the Gulf of Louisiana, Texas, Mississippi, Alabama, Florida, Mexico, and many parts of Central America. And these areas, already some of the poorest in the region, will suffer disproportionately more in the coming years as seafood markets fail and the local supporting industry collapses, that poverty and unemployment will rise, bringing a whole host of new suffering, that our sins have resulted in the destruction of delicate marshes, which offer the last line of defense against flooding, therefore exposing these same damaged coastal communities to even greater harm by floods and tropical storms, that these coastal marshes that play such a vital role in protecting not only against erosion, but in providing the basis of the food chain for the oceans of the world, and how we have damaged the reefs of the coasts of many countries, reefs that are already imperiled by ocean warming and acidification, are placed in further jeopardy by both the oil that is spilled, but also by the toxins which we so recklessly deploy on the surface at the wellhead, that we have deployed so that we do not understand the consequences and the impact long-term that they will have. And this disaster can quickly polarize us and turn us into those who are touters of drill, baby, drill, or environmentalists. While the deeper lesson is this, that the interconnectedness of our students that we have talked about so passionately this week is lost. That we are less deaf to the lessons that we have learned from the Shetland Islands to Nigeria, to off the coasts of East Africa, to in Southeast Asia. That there is no place to go away from these consequences. There is no away in a closed planetary system. And yet we continue to tread upon the earth with reckless abandon. If sin, social sin at its core, is about separation and alienation, then perhaps I propose that grace is about restoration, resurrection, and right relationship. What you are looking at here is two photos of Mount St. Helens. 30 years ago, on May 18th, 1980, Mount St. Helens erupted and destroyed over 200 square miles of mature forest. A massive landslide reduced the mountain summit by 1,300 feet in less than 3 minutes. 1,300 feet in 3 minutes. Ecosystems were obliterated, and the eruption of Mount St. Helens destroyed so much that it is often overlooked, is that the mountain has resurrected an entirely new ecosystem in less than 30 years, that the earth is desperate to teach us about resurrection. Not the same ecosystem, but a new ecosystem. What was a 15-story wall of mud and volcanic material moving at 300 miles per hour down a mountainside is now 130 new ponds, new lakes, thousands of creatures. The fern and flora and fauna flourish, and the lupine and then the flowers have begun to rebuild soil. Gophers that survived the blast underground have proven surprisingly important, forcing up nutrient-rich soil from the ash levels below. And alder have returned, hosting scores of blackbirds, and once again the air is filled with tuneful songs. Some animals, such as the northwestern salamander, continue to adapt, keeping their gills longer and learning to live in an entirely new way. 30 years later, as I hiked over this same ridge, windy ridge, Spirit Lake comes into full view. And what began some 40,000 years ago on an eroded surface of a volcano offers us now a beautiful view of creation, inspiring us all. Because healing and resurrection and right relationship are about the concrete steps that teach us. Ignatius also teaches us, and we incorporate into the Ignatian pedagogical paradigm, that we are to use our reflection in order that we might be moved into action. This same kind of reflection happens as we compose the place where we pray. And if we look carefully, and you can see those Sitka spruce in the center there, those Sitka spruce are over 450 years old. That they were around here on the earth when Ignatius was a boy. And they teach us a deep theological truth, that creation is a communion of subjects, not a collection of objects. That you and I and those Sitka are a communion of subjects, not a collection of objects. That incarnation leads to transformation. And if we were to take the incarnation seriously, we know that Christ participated in the carbon-based reality of the earth, and by participation in it has made it sacred. The famous ecologian Thomas Berry speaks about his meadow experience, and every single one of us has a meadow experience, I guarantee it. He says this: as a young person, some 12 years old, I walked down from the field behind my house, and the field was covered with lilies rising above the thick grass. A magic moment, for this experience gave my life meaning. It became the touch place where I could return to God. And I would ask all of you, where is your meadow experience? Is it at the top of a mountain? Is it at the sea at night? Is it next to a river? Where is the place in the natural world where you find God most readily? Asking our students to do this will move them quickly into that process of reflection. And if we were to move away from the anthropocentrism that we find in so much of our Western way of praying, and that since Jesus of Nazareth was composed of star stuff and earth stuff, since his body existed in a network of relationship extending into the whole physical universe, that his resurrection signals the beginning of redemption, not just of human beings, but the redemption of all of creation, indeed the redemption of the whole world. And by becoming the flesh, the Word made flesh, that confers a blessing upon the natural world. And in a place, a spiritual concept, that the whole world becomes for us an access into the relationship with the living God, part of the flesh of the Word that Christ became. If we move away from this anthropocentrism and imagine ourselves, as I asked a retreatant to do one summer while directing the exercises, as the cave itself, and he responded to me the next day and was catapulted into the 4th week of the exercises, and he could only say through his tears 4 words: Christ rose within me. When I asked a woman who struggled with the fact that she did not feel complete as a woman because she could not have children, to pray with the 4th Gospel of Mark, where there are no human beings in the parable at all, simply a seed that is planted and grows to fullness. And she came back the next day saying that it is the word of God that would be planted in her, and that she was to bear witness that she was indeed, in her words, not mine, to bring forth the life-giving word. And I have often wondered, my friends, if there was also physical healing along with the clear spiritual healing that was possible in that time. If we move away from anthropocentrism, I believe this is the first way, number one, the first way that we can begin to engage in ecological vision, the long view. We use this term that God dwells in all things. And who knew? Who knew that there were caterpillars under the sea? Who knew that you would discover a seahorse so small? Who knew that we would be inspired time and again by creatures taking flight as we so often wish we could from this destruction that we have incurred upon the planet? How many of us, in walking the bluff right outside of this retreat house, have looked down at the river below and thought to ourselves, indeed, Ignatius was right, that God dwells in all things, and that his insight at the Cardinere River, where we find ourselves, offers us a paradigm of understanding deeply what is being offered by the natural world. That our walking and looking and examining, our entering into the very experience and context that Ignatius had, helps us to understand this short capturing of our spirituality in a new way, that God indeed does dwell in all things. But we cannot remain there. The second thing that we must do if we are to impart this ecological vision is to assume leadership and study. This was a photo that I took of a small child in Latin America. And we must be able to help our students in our classrooms enter in through the IPP to study and understand exactly how much of the water, the resources of the earth like water, that we need in order to move forward with one vision. That ecological vision that is called forth in the general congregations, that is called forth in movements like Eco-Jesuit, a presence online, that is called forth by our Franciscan brothers and sisters especially. How many of us have sat down and had a burger and fries? About 4,000 gallons of water are needed to grow 1 bushel of corn, 11,000 gallons of water to grow 1 bushel of wheat, and about 135,000 gallons to grow 1 ton of alfalfa to feed the beef, those beef cows. And yet we know of the starvation of the billions that are on our planet home. How does this call us into question? To question what it is that we serve in our food, in our cafeterias, in our apostolic works. How is it that we could help our students in our classrooms to measure and calculate and look at the context through which the majority of the world eats? What an amazing opportunity for reflection and action. What an amazing thing to look at something as simple as what is being served for lunch that day in our schools and calculate from there the virtual water that is used. What if we were to say to our cafeterias also that we could cut solid waste from our diets? Because there is a tremendous misconception, my friends. The tremendous misconception that plastics that go into curbside recycling bins get recycled, when in fact it is less than 10%. Because it is more expensive than working with virgin materials, plastic recyclers are not growing but closing down their doors. There is no closed loop when it comes to plastic. When you buy a plastic good, you're buying something that was made from scarce petroleum resources, that is designed to last for hundreds, if not thousands of years. And all the more tragic, given that most uses of our plastic are one-time disposable uses. So that the water that we don't end up being turned into another bottle of water. But where does it end up? Most often, in the dump. And then there's plateware. polystyrene and plastic, for all intents and purposes, are with us forever. And yet how many of us have schools that use these in our cafeterias and in our faculty lunchrooms? Again, what an opportunity to look at the very things that we use in our schools as a teaching moment, because we know that learning doesn't just happen in the classroom. We know too that the accumulation of these plastics have produced continent-size collections of plastics in the world's oceans and locations around the world, particularly in the Pacific. And those sailors tell us of going for days in a thick soup of plastic particles. It would be nice to think that these plastics were breaking down, but they're not. They're breaking apart. And in their breaking apart, they are being ingested by sea creatures. And the bioaccumulation is tragically affecting particularly the least in our world. This plastic is not degrading, but over 60 billion tons every year ends up in our oceans. And except for the small amount that is being incinerated, the very small amount, the rest ends up being ingested by other fellow creatures of our planet home. Meanwhile, every year we churn out 60 billion tons, much more as it becomes disposable products meant for use only for one single time, much of which becomes disposable products. But we have the opportunity also to make specific changes. Let me offer just 3 that are so concrete and easy to do. Many of you have seen me for this conference carrying around this water bottle. I took this water bottle from one of our schools where we give it as a gift to all incoming freshmen. And what did we print on the reverse side of the water bottle? But an ecological examine, inviting our students to consider the impact so that something as simple as a water bottle that can be used over and over again out of recycled material can become a teaching moment. I don't know about all of you, but I will admit, being an addict here today, I am completely addicted to coffee. And yet we know that over 50 billion styrofoam cups are thrown away each year. 50 billion. And what about plastic bags in grocery stores? If we were able to eliminate disposable from our school and from our lives, 3 places to easily do that: with our shopping, with our water bottles, and with our coffee cups. If we look at water bottle consumption, we know that bottled water uses over 12 gallons of water just to produce the plastic bottle. And bottle used to package water takes over 1,000 years to biodegrade, and if incinerated, produces toxic fumes. That its recycling is only feasible if limited, and the recycling only happens to 1 out of 5 water bottles. It takes over 1.5 million barrels to meet the U.S. demand on water bottle use alone. If we continue to look, we can see that the right relationship means that we need to get off the bottle, or whatever your addiction looks like. I was so impressed when I came here to this retreat house, because if we look at the allocation of our investments, I was so impressed because I saw low flush toilets and lights that automatically turn off, and an elevator that uses an eco drive rather than a hydraulic oil system. I was so impressed by the sunshades and other small things that this retreat house, this place of our conference, has chosen to do to lower its impact. One of the things that our ecological awareness can do is to begin to teach our students, and it can be fun. These teachable moments for our students can be fun, because before and after, We took a compost program at our school, composted the food waste, and check this out. We sold the dirt that we produced back to our parents. They were going to buy anything that was being produced by their students. Starting a compost program was easy, it was fun, and it ended up being the perfect addition to soil. Composting was taking what our natural world does so beautifully and so well as a teachable moment in our schools. We were able to sort the trash of 1 week's worth of trash in our schools, and what did we found? That we could save nearly 135 pounds, 158 kilos every week, that we were able to eliminate from the school's budget and save $2,500 with all the stuff. Finally, a sixth thing that we can do is to help our students practice the examen. An ecological examen that you have all received already in the paper published. But what does the examen do? It exposes that we can look around the room and see here in this room, fear wrestling with love. But if we remain committed to a cause, we remain committed because fears will always arise. They will always arise. And instead, if we can commit to a new way of learning, that there are countless activities that we can do in our school. Because, my friends, the committed person is a person who stands up, is a person who takes action. The committed person takes the long view. Ignatian spirituality and our imaginations particularly offers us a new ecological vision. Because the long view means that we are not the center, that we are part of something so much greater. The long view means paying attention to what we use, how we eat, how we live, and even how we have fun. The long view means doing what is right and good simply because it is right and good, not because it benefits us in any way. The long view means having vision, being creative, and expanding your understanding of Earth community. The long view means seeking what is possible, not what is expedient, cheap, or easy. The long view sees the world around us as astonishing and receives it as an invitation to be transformed. My friends, the long view lives in you. The long view lives in me. Search for it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Joseph, for that very powerful and moving address. We might just take 60 seconds just to stand up if those wish to keep their circulation moving, and then we'll sit 60 seconds just to move. Thank you, everyone. We might just take a few moments to reflect ourselves. And now you might like to share with those sitting close to you. Thank you. You're obviously all very engaged in discussion there, but now it's the opportunity for comment or question. Also, Joseph, with 6 minutes to go this morning, Joseph will give a response to some of the comments and questions that were made. But for those that may wish to make comment or question now, please. Number 1, down the back. Number 2, Chris, number 3, 4, and 5. Let's go with those.
Mauricio García de Colombia.
Mauricio García from Colombia. Thank you for your presentation. I think it is very powerful in its ecological dimension. However, I must admit that in my case, the presentation made me fall into an inner conflict. The whole of your presentation has placed me in an inner conflict because on the one hand, I admit that the future of us as a species is or must be in ours going deep for an ecological commitment, because we are killing the planet. We are actually killing planet Earth. We are really doing away with our means of subsistence. But then from the vision of Latin America, however, I think that the commitment isn't only ecological, it's not only environmental. That is not sufficient, however important this ecological commitment may be, because one has to refer to what we were analyzing yesterday, to homeless people, to those refugees, victims of violence. We have to refer as well to situations of poor people in the main cities in the world living very difficult situations. We have to think as well about indigenous, autochthonous populations. And then that means that it places other dimensions of commitment. And then the commitment in the school and the commitment of the students has to take into account the ecology, but the ecology only is not enough. The commitment dimension has to be larger, wider, and that's where I see a difficult challenge. Obviously, acknowledging the huge importance of the ecology, and the GC35 tenets are very, very clear. But we have to take into account that the committed person we want to educate in our schools has to go beyond ecology. There are other dimensions of commitment we have to think of. Thank you.
Yeah. Joe, first and foremost, congratulations and big thank you for helping me to understand the Ignatian vision of ecology. I myself felt very ashamed and guilty because I'm still destroying the environment. Coming to the school, we have environment education in schools, but sad to say, that particular subject is taken as an optional. We teach as religion, kind of, we're not taking it seriously. From the point of view of my country, India, a little study of law that I have done, there are hundreds of laws to protect environment with regard to air pollution, noise pollution, water pollution, environment pollution. Though there are hundreds of laws, it has not made a deep impact, I feel. Just having laws is not important. A greater sense of awareness one need to inculcate. Thirdly, there has been a lot of PIL, public interest litigation against various destructive gases, oil gases, etc. And yet we see that in spite of all this, there is still the environment is being destroyed in the school. And therefore, as Jesuits, with the Ignatian vision of ecology that you have presented, it is a strong commitment on the part of Jesuits to take up this issue of environment.
Chris.
Chris Gleeson from Melbourne, Australia. Thank you, Joe, for a very moving presentation. And like Peter yesterday and Montserrat and George before you, you spoke from the heart. And I'm very grateful for that. Just one comment, if I could. One of the rich things about your presentation is that you brought it back to the spiritual exercises again and again. And to me, I'm looking for that all the time. I'm thinking about our new document on education that we're trying to write for the society. And I'm thinking, how can we take Sipei back to our provinces, and how can we take Sipei back to our assistancies or conferences? And I think it's that connection between spirituality and pedagogy. And you've helped us a great deal with that, and I'm very grateful for that. Thinking about commitment, the three classes of people in the spiritual exercises. There's another exercise that we can develop. I think that's, just thinking from my own point of view and from my own conference, my own province, that's what we have to do. We've got to develop much more strongly that connection between spirituality and pedagogy. And you've helped us do that. Thank you very much.
Luis Ugalde
Luis Ugalde from Venezuela. Joseph, thank you very much indeed for your very eloquent and vibrant presentation. But today is the last day of our seminar, and I think it's important to see this as a part of the commitment. And remember that today we have to go for action. Our commitment is compassionate, it is competent, and it is conscious. So we have to gather all this and reflect on it. And I believe that the first conscience is this encounter with the negated other. The slogan of this meeting is that the world is ours, but half of humankind has to say the world is not ours. And the education given by the Jesuits, well, one will have to prove whether this is more ours at the end than it is now. It is not fully evident as yet. Looking at our leadership, the people that we train, that we educate, and so on. So I think that the commitment is that those who, with full truth in humanity, say nowadays the world does not belong to us, good or bad, but the world clearly doesn't belong to us. So how do we make sure that the education they receive will not perpetuate their exclusion and their negation, and that the Jesuit educational system that will not solve that, however, will educate and train leaders and persons that, yes, will be fully aware and conscious of this. If this is not the case, we will be members of the Pharisees, compared to Jesus, who wants to go and deal with those that the God of the Pharisees abandons. And something else is about commitment to the previous 3 C's. Commitment means laws, institutions, mentalities, mindsets, so then excluding cultures that have to be changed. And we are not going to be making miracles, but indeed we can make our students leave with these ideas in their heads and their souls. And commitment means the full global person, intelligence, affections, hands, head, heart, and something very Ignatian, to order the means to get to the ends. So that means to organize education, at least the one we have and that we teach, so that, yes, indeed, that half humanity that nowadays is excluded, forgotten, and negated in continents, countries, villages and towns, or even in the case of individuals with an education that is not good enough, it only makes them consumers but not helpers. So then we have to analyze our leadership, our education, and make sure that it becomes more responsible. So I think that today's day has to make sure that those 3 elements are gathered within commitment. Thank you.
Some more comments. 1, 2. My apology.
Luisilla de Barcelona, España.
Luisilla from Barcelona, Spain. I thank you to make us think about something that doesn't seem really easy or close when we talk about commitment. I would say, and I'm talking in this case about myself, I don't feel the immediate threat of what we are being told, but I do think that in 10, 20 years, things might happen if nothing is done. He's talking about a chain of causes and effects, but of course it's not only something to do with the ecology. I think this is a chain that we should reflect on, and I don't really know it fully, but it goes from a logic of growth, efficiency, and pragmatism focused on the short-term view, and that has ecological and social consequences that result in poverty too. I don't think that the chain of pollution, for example, is any different from the chain of injustice or poverty, I see then that how to explain the workings are very similar, and then it would be good in our schools to focus on this. We have to make sure that this the conscience and awareness would lead to commitment. It would be good that would identify us in the future, as before that social commitment identified us. So it's good that we work on this commitment towards our world that we feel so much part of. Thank you.
From Poland, Kraków. So thank you, Joe, for this presentation. And came to my mind many different thoughts, because recently in the European Union was a debate about pollutions. So we know that this is very political and market financial problem, you know. Just simple example. In my school, we decide to segregate trash. So we have to pay more to take this trash off, no? Because we segregate it. And this is interesting how this market looks like in the world, no? Many countries make money because of pollutions. And we know that many countries like United States, China, don't accept some international agreements about that. So this is one thing that I think we have to promote the problem in media in Jesuit schools around the world. Like, we know the media are very powerful. So we have to show that this is a huge problem of pollution. At the same time, we have to educate people how to be aware and how to be careful how we use our sources. So this spiritual aspect is very important in school, at school formation, like teaching teachers and students how to use our sources. But it's a proverb that example is coming from up. So you know that if people don't take care, like, it's difficult to convince students to take care to create and educate ecological sense. So I think this is two things: promote in media and educate at school on the base of spiritual aspects, you know, that gratitude, what we receive, incarnation, what we receive from God. So this is like two thoughts what I could understand. Thank you.
Thank you for bringing back the theme of reconciliation. I think it's very, very important to understand this. We are before a big challenge and a complex challenge. And we can experience this complexity with the image before us. What a wonderful image. And it helps me to pray this image. But also, what a huge pollution to take this image.
Okay, some 1, 2, 3.
Ilse Dekker from the Netherlands.
4.
Thank you very much for your speech. I think it is a very important topic, and I think it is very much connected to the other C's we were talking about. So we should not, I think, compartmentalize. And I think it is part of the, we've been talking before about the difference between the mechanical image or the organic image, the images we use. And I think Jesus was very much talking from an organic image, and this is referring to this image. And I think it is very important in our our secularized cultures, like in the Netherlands, because nature is a very easy entrance for the young people in secularized contexts into spirituality. There's something of this awe and this sacredness of nature. And tomorrow we will visit Sagrada Familia, and I think this is the very expression of the sacredness of nature, and it touches our hearts. So I think it is very important. And also you were saying we should teach our students, but I think the young people in today's world could teach us, because they are very creative in finding ways to protect nature. And I think we should facilitate this creativity for them in our schools. Thank you.
George from India. Thank you very much for the presentation, but I have a problem, because if I present this data to my students, they simply will not understand. Because where I am right now is a place which is green 12 months of the year, 365 days. We live close to the forest. We even have a lake where we can just take a boat, go into the middle, just collect water and drink. Absolutely clean because of the fruit trees that are around the lake. So, our students feel that this is their right, because they have everything so beautiful, so green, so pleasant, so wonderful. So taking from the nature, using it for one's own benefit and just throwing it away is their right, because they don't understand the importance or the treasure that they have. My difficulty will be to bring this whole aspect of what is happening to the earth, the universe, into the classroom, and then convince them that we need to do something. And also to make them realize they have a responsibility to themselves, that what they are being given needs to be preserved for the next generation to enjoy. The second thing is to make them realize they have a responsibility, a commitment to their families, because their forefathers have preserved this so that they can enjoy it now. It will also be a challenge to make them realize that they have a responsibility to the larger society. But I think their major challenge will be that they are also a privileged group, because they are in our school, which is considered to be one of the best schools in the whole area. And therefore, they have a larger responsibility to enlighten the society that you have a responsibility to maintain. And finally, I would also like to go along with the first interaction that we had, or the intervention that was made. Commitment to a cause is part of our education. And we should not limit that commitment just to an issue which is very, very crucial and major. But enlighten the students, whatever they are doing, whether it be their studies, social issues, being compassionate, being aware of the nature, whatever it is, make them be committed totally. And maybe what we talked about, making the Ignatian examen a reality, maybe make it a green Ignatian examen. Thank you.
Kieran.
Thank you, Father, for your presentation. My name is Kieran Gill. I'm doing Regency at St Ignatius College in Adelaide, Australia. Father Mauricio spoke about the multiple dimensions of commitment. It seems to me that the major needs in the church today include the continuing development of professional standards and caring for people who have suffered sexual abuse within the church. Yesterday we reflected on anger, and there's a great deal of anger about the abuse and the betrayal that has occurred. As we know, there are such deep needs for healing and reconciliation, and also for the prevention of sexual abuse in the future. So it seems to me that it would be good for this community of educational leaders to reflect on our response to these needs. Thank you.
Jose?
Jose Mesa of the Courier. Joe, thank you very much for your presentation. It has truly been a testimony of your work, a dimension that I believe for us, especially in schools, we must work on, and think of. If there is a dimension that we still find difficult and a dimension that we still need to do a lot of work on, it is this precisely, the ecological, environmental dimension. We've made headway in many others, but this one we find difficult. And as we were told before, we should learn from the young generations that have greater sensitivity towards this ecological dimension that maybe we don't have as much. And as well as many of you have already mentioned, it's precisely today's invitation in the way that you have put it forward, Joe, that makes us be able to live with these tensions that seem to be too much for us. How can we educate at the same time for justice? How can we educate simultaneously towards solidarity? How can we educate in a competent manner? And now we have another dimension added, the ecological dimension. It would seem just too much, too heavy burden for our backs in our schools. And however, that is the daunting task that we have, and that is the dimension. You said it in the last general congregation. We were told precisely to work on this enormous commitment, not all that different to the social justice commitments. Precisely, the General Father, when he changed the name, he talked about social justice and ecology, precisely to indicate that these two dimensions are intricately united and you cannot refer to one without referring to the other. And sometimes it seems easier to talk about the first, social justice, because we've been working on it for longer, there is greater awareness and we see it more clearly. But justice, however, has to emanate as well from this. And today we have been able to question our action and our thoughts. And we have been told as well about this huge responsibility, making sure that our schools are healthy and protected environments in which there is no possibility of abuse. And there is a clear commitment of the society there. It has been a clear message. So it all seems a lot. And maybe like St. Ignatius felt in Manresa, he said, I am very small for so much. And this now seems very daunting, much more than all of us, as small as we are, can develop. But St. Ignatius left Manresa fully convinced that it was not him but God who could do it. And only when that inner change happened here in Manresa, when Ignatius realized it was not him but God, then finally he could live on the basis of reconciliation.
Some more speakers. 1, Amon 2, 3, 4, and right at the back, 5.
Thank you very much for your reflection and for all the interventions and contributions. And thank you, Joe. It's been great. I had the chance of dynamizing the online sessions before our Sipei seminar, and in the online internet sessions something happened similar to what was being mentioned here a moment ago. The fact that there are not many activities for commitment in the curricula seems, well, to be a divergence, because, and sometimes as well, there are places where we are that have everything anyway from the environmental point of view, and how difficult it is to convince people that there's a need. But what was most difficult was to actually define the commitment in specific actions within the schools, specific measures in the schools. And finally, what emerged in the sessions clearly was the idea that small actions are hugely powerful, enormously powerful. And why are they so powerful? Because they lead to reflection and they lead to action, the action and reflection of our students. And they lead to reflection and action, but not only at an individual level that is important in itself, but they lead to reflection and action in a collective manner, in a group manner. And to act as a group, as a collective, is something incredibly strong. So strong, or as strong, as we had the other day, a week before Sipei started. A 6-year-old girl, just 6-year-old girl, went into a bookshop with her mother, wanting to buy paper for the printer. And I was in the queue in the bookshop behind the little girl, and I heard the girl say, "Mommy, do you know that this paper is a tree?" The mother looked at her daughter, looked at me, I nodded, and we were all collectively astonished, and our heart was really constricted. It was a moment of emotion. Small things are so powerful.
Joe, you brought us back to reconciliation. And is it okay if I go to confession? Bless me, Father, for I have sinned. When I read the 4 papers, I was most uncomfortable with yours. Because it looked like the 4C. I thought it was the climate change paper instead of the commitment paper. But listening to you, I've flipped. I've completely flipped. Probably partly or initially because of how personally you gave to the subject. It wasn't just an educational paper. It wasn't just an academic paper. It was deeply personal and spiritual. So I wanted to thank you for that. But I started to think about it, and I thought, if we want our students to be committed to everything, they'll be committed to nothing. So in schools, we have to try and maybe pick a few examples. And I know you're suggesting way more than just climate change in the schools, of course. And Peter said yesterday, we have to put these deep immersion experiences in the school. I think Peter said we can't take 1,800 people out of the school all the time. So we have to start these in the school. And this seems like an amazing opportunity for, and if I think of the Jesuit mission, a faith that does justice, there's this climate justice. And why not in each of the schools, run programs and use this as an example to commit people to justice and to give witness. Because as you said so eloquently at the end, because it's the right thing to do. So it seems like a wonderful opportunity to fill that gap, connecting all those C's. So thank you, Joe. Do I get absolution after that?
In fact, that might be a good time to invite Joseph to respond to some of the comments that have been made.
First of all, thank you all for comments. No? Yes? I thank you all for the comments, and yes, indeed, I agree with many of them that this is absolutely a difficult and complex issue. But I am undaunted because I look at the talent in this room, because I have seen many of our Jesuit schools and works around the country where I see daily the continual commitment of creative, imaginative, and extraordinary communities of teachers and learners, of students, and folks coming together to tackle precisely complex issues. that I would argue that the Jesuit schools around the world, we have what Pedro Arrupe called the greatest asset of the Society of Jesus is the graduates of Jesuit schools. And I would use that the key to unlock that complexity is precisely what you yourselves have indicated, and that is that as we look at small things, that in what Luis from Spain, his intervention when he said, it is precisely in the small things that we find tremendous power. An example, if we look at the habits that we are cultivating in our schools and how we do that, how do we bring about change? Well, we begin not with some huge initiative. We begin by changing some of the small habits in our schools. What would it be like to have just certain kinds of recycling bins in our schools? What would it be like to have all of our physics lessons for one semester to use examples from the natural world? What would it be like if our ethics classes took on the question of, is water a right or a privilege? We say that we have the right to life. But we know that if we don't have water for 7 days, we will die. But we also know that water is being privatized around the world, and the majority of water rights are being bought up by companies like Thames and Suez and Vivendi and others. So if we allow these ecological questions, that we do not have to have every single answer, but we cannot be afraid to ask the questions. Because in Jesuit schools, there should not be any question that we are afraid to ask. I'll say that again. In our schools, there should not be any question that we are afraid to ask. Because I believe deeply that fear is of the dark spirit. And we have said that over and over again here. There shouldn't be questions that we are afraid to ask. We might not be able to find the answers right away, but we can continue to ask the questions. Another point. Some people have brought up the questions of the poor, and I'd like to use the example of poor and indigenous persons in my own country, that often I find with the poor, and particularly the indigenous persons, that there is in those populations, in those groups, an incredible commitment to the earth and to creation, an incredible instruction that we need to come to those groups with deep humility and to the kind of learning that the Triqui people from Mexico might teach us, that the Lakota people in my own country in North America might teach us, that the Inuit people of northern Canada and Alaska, that the First Nations people, that I'm guessing the Aboriginal people from Australia teach us, and to say, what do we need to learn that we haven't had the answer for, that you, with your closeness in proximity to the earth, might teach us? The question, and this is certainly not the first time I've been asked the question about cost. Well, it's going to cost too much to be more ecologically aware. I'm certain, and that's why I used the example of this retreat house in my presentation, that there was a very clear cost analysis of what it would cost to put in a traditional elevator system or a traditional plumbing system. And it's why I also said that we do what is right and good simply because it is right and good, not because it benefits us in any way or because it's expedient, cheap, or easy. Often doing what is right is the hardest way through something. But by making this kind of commitment, then our very buildings that house our students become teachers themselves. Yes, the structures teach. Just like the structures of our churches and places of worship teach us and orient us in a Godward direction, so too our building commitments. So, for example, using LEED requirements, that is the leadership in energy efficiency and design. So using LEED requirements ends up having things, incredible benefits. When you have greater air circulation in your buildings, you have employees that are sick less often. You have happier employees. You have employees that find in their work a sense of mission because they see in the commitments of the building and the resources of the school something that is for them as well. two more short remarks, and that is the reason why I highlight the examine again and again. Not only is it such a deep part of our spirituality, but it is one of the pillars, because if we are to go through, as Ilsa said, through the door of creation, we find that there is much instruction in our relationship with God and our relationship with the earth that we have not even begun to tap into. And that if we allow a sense of what God is teaching us to creation is a great lesson in being reconciled with the natural world. And if God indeed vivifies, gives life to the natural world, that yes, these challenges will be complex, but it will begin by our self-examination through the Ignatian Examen of what are our habits. Are they consumptive habits? Are they habits of using things that are non-renewable? And we can begin to change those habits like all of us have changed habits in the past. It does not have to be one grand change that happens. But if we take the lead from our students, as was said several times, then we can begin by looking at and addressing, because how does change happen? The social activist, Margaret Mead, said again and again, she was looking at how does change happen? It happens with the actions of a small group of committed individuals. We are not a small group. We have a tremendous worldwide network. And we have been asked by the general congregation, by the spirituality of our founder, and by the leadership of the Society of Jesus to take on this commitment. That yes, ecology is one commitment, but I will say something very bold to finish. The question is never, will the earth continue? The earth will continue. It has gone on for billions of years, and if we remember that we are derivative of the earth, we will remember that the question is never, will the earth continue? The question is, will human beings continue on the earth? Thank you.
Joseph, I just wanted to thank you for providing us with a theological base that God created the world. And Ignatius, here on this spot, in the cave and on the river, gave us that wonderful gift of Ignatian spirituality. And through Ignatian spirituality has emerged an Ignatian pedagogy. And that pedagogy and the application of that pedagogy in real life situations means that commitment now is synonymous with action. Thank you very much.